What in the holy hell is happening with Boeing? Just as I thought I was done with my subset of videos that I wanted to cut for the coming few days, I just saw a headline that completely shattered my brain, just completely unraveled the noodle in there into this whole long straight stretch of nothingness. And I have to look into this. I got to talk about it. Obviously, Boeing's been in the news for the past few weeks, maybe months, years even. It's been in the news for the past few years over very legitimate concerns for the safety of its airlines. And it's been ratcheted up in these past few weeks for certain as more and more catastrophic events have occurred. We're talking about situations where doors or windows have been blown off mid-flight and people are sitting in their chairs next to like exposed holes, giant gaping holes in the side of the plane. Now, gratefully, that particular instance that occurred, that there's like video and photo evidence of, happened when the plane wasn't at cruising altitude. At cruising altitude, people would have been sucked out, and it would have been catastrophic loss of life. But at the altitude that it occurred at, it was a terrifying annoyance, if just an annoyance. But other dangerous things have been popping off lately too. I'll talk about them a little bit before diving into what prompted me to shoot this video here. The first thing that occurred a couple of days ago, breaking: United Airlines Boeing 777 loses tire while taking off from San Francisco, crushing cars on the ground. This could have easily... You see that? Right there. Right there. That could have easily killed someone. Look what it did to the cars. That's fucking crazy. Like, the wheel fell off and crushed multiple cars.
And there are so many police here now. It's crazy. So these two cars, and they found some of the land.
And it wrecked this gate too. Now, the thing is, John Oliver just did a piece about it a couple weeks ago over Boeing, and a lot of whistleblower activity that occurred around exposing safety violations and whatnot. The fact that they're regulated pretty much by themselves. They regulate themselves with the blessings of the FAA, which should be illegal. It's definitely worth watching, going onto YouTube and looking at that Last Week Tonight segment. But it's just crazy how much more. Usually, when these sorts of situations happen, it feels kind of like dogpiling, right? It feels like, oh man, is it really this bad? Or are people just dogpiling because it's fun to dogpile? But I think with Boeing, in this particularly rare instance, when you put together all the information that was collated by journalists like the writing staff at Last Week Tonight and any other sort of journalistic outfit that have been talking about Boeing for some time, it's not just them, obviously. It always happens whenever there's some kind of a situation. Someone does some digging and figures out what the root cause was, whether it's lax regulations or whether it's, it all stems back to lax regulations in one capacity or another, and cost-cutting mechanisms. But we had this other issue that happened shortly after the wheel fell off. This was in Dallas, I believe. Breaking: a Boeing 737 rolled off the runway in Houston. It's in Houston this morning after issues with its landing gear. No injuries per ABC. So, landing gear issue caused this thing to fly off the runway. Like, this shit just happens now so regularly. It used to be that planes were largely regarded as safe, like safer than driving cars, but given the mass propensity for these issues to be occurring now, it's kind of hard to imagine we can continue to make that statement without, smirking, knowing the implications. The thing is, like, there are no other alternatives. If you don't want to fly Boeing, then you're shit out of luck, because it's a monopoly. There are only two major manufacturers for airlines right now. It's Boeing and it's Airbus. And, Airbus, I don't know how many Airbus planes are in operation in America. It's a French company, but most of the planes that fly are Boeing ones. So this is what a monopoly will grant you: your inability to actually have any kind of choice in the marketplace. If you don't feel comfortable flying Boeing, then you're not going to be flying. And worse than that, it's another issue with too big to fail. These planes should be grounded. Like Boeing planes, all Boeing planes should be grounded because they can't be trusted to self-regulate. They can't be trusted to adhere to safety standards that make these planes reliable for from a public safety standpoint. But you can't ground these planes because they're the only planes flying. If you grounded all Boeing planes, you're basically saying no more air travel in America. It's like what was it was basically like returning to a immediate post 9/11 world where there was no air traffic, right? And that sort of thing has a colossal impact on economies. Like it's not going to happen. Like we can't ground these planes. So you definitely have a too big to fail, even though these things are failing, as they're either launching or landing, and in some instances mid-flight. You see here under business and finance is the phrase Epstein, which I think will give you a hint as to why I wanted to pop on and talk about this video. Epstein. I guess that kind of hints at some very dire, unfortunate news in the developing world of Boeing. Boeing whistleblower found dead in U.S. A former Boeing employee known for raising concerns about the firm's production standards has been found dead in the U.S. John Barnett had worked for Boeing for 32 years until his retirement in 2017. In the days before his death, he had been giving evidence in a whistleblower lawsuit against the company. Boeing said it was saddened to hear of Mr. Barnett's passing. The Charleston County coroner confirmed his death to the BBC Monday. It said the 62-year-old had died from a, quote, self-inflicted wound on the 9 March. That's weird. I don't know why I can't read it that way. I'm too Ameribrained. I say March 9th, BBC, not 9 March. On 9 March, and police were investigating. Mr. Barnett had worked with the U.S. plane giant for 32 years until his retirement in 2017 on health grounds. From 2010, he worked as a quality manager at the North Charleston plant, making the 787 Dreamliner, a state-of-the-art airliner used mainly on long-haul routes. In 2019, Mr. Barnett told the BBC that under-pressure workers had been deliberately fitting substandard parts to aircraft on the production line. He also said he uncovered serious problems with oxygen systems, which could mean 1 in 4 breathing masks would not work in an emergency. That's a colossal percentage. 25%. 25% of the breathing masks just aren't going to work. So good luck on that dice roll when one of these planes inevitably fails and a cabin becomes depressurized as a result of like fucking bolts flying off. Which is pretty shitty. It's one thing that like the plane can't keep itself together in one piece. You would at least hope that the emergency systems on board would be, quality. But now the plane can't hold itself together and you might get a bum oxygen unit. He said soon after starting work in South Carolina, he had become concerned that the push to get new aircraft built meant the assembly process was rushed and safety was compromised, something the company denied. He later told the BBC that workers had failed to follow procedures intended to track components through the factory, allowing defective components to go missing. I mean, this is all just part and parcel of we're cutting regulations. Like whenever you hear conservatives talk about deregulating, this is what they're talking about. This is what they're talking about. Oh, we got to get rid of government red tape. Well, that shit exists for a reason. And maybe it's not visibly evident when you're talking about like a Fritos plant or something, where, you're just going to the market, you see a food in shiny packaging, you buy it, you shove it in your mouth hole, you forget about it. And in that respect, maybe regulations, the obtuseness of regulations can be demonized enough to get some dummies to vote in favor of it. But when you're talking about something as visible and as recognizable and as recognizably bad as air travel, as wheels falling off mid-flight and holes in cabins being ripped open and shit like that, it's a lot harder to get people to agree to the notion that deregulation is a worthwhile endeavor when the end result of that deregulation is, for consumer standpoint, it's a shittier project. It's a shittier product. Nobody thinks air travel has gotten better in the past 30 or 40 years. Absolutely nobody, except maybe the richest of the richest of the rich. People that can fly in like those luxury cabins on Air Emirates or something. But for everybody else, air travel has gotten substantially worse in those years. It's gotten substantially worse. For the most part, it's gotten a little bit more expensive. I mean, sometimes you can get some deals. There's some dynamic pricing mechanisms that can allow you to find some cut rate deals. And obviously you have your budget airlines, but we don't even need to get about the problems with the budget airlines. For the most part, you're getting a shittier service for that deregulation. And now, very visibly on top of that, you're putting your life at risk in a way that you never had before if you're getting on one of these Boeing planes. So keep all of that in mind next time you hear some shitty conservative talk about, oh, we got to deregulate the markets. Mr. Barnett said he had alerted managers to his concerns, but no action had been taken. Boeing denied his assertions. However, a 2017 review by the U.S. regulator, the FAA, did uphold some of Mr. Barnett's concerns. It established that the location of at least 53 non-conforming parts in the factory was unknown and that they were considered lost. Boeing was ordered to take remedial action. What does that even mean? Boeing was ordered to take remedial action. By the way, a lot of the times when these people are like out of compliance with regulatory actions, they just get fined. They just get fined. Nobody goes to prison, and the fines are never substantial. It's always like 0.003% of their yearly revenue. So it's like, oh, we can afford to get in trouble with the FAA on this because we'll just write a check that doesn't even put a dent in our yearly earnings, as a function of us being a monopoly. as a function of us being a government-sanctioned monopoly. Like, people need to go to prison for a long, long time, on top of like fines that put a substantial impact on a company's profitability. Let's see. On the oxygen cylinders issue, the company said that in 2017 it had, quote, identified some oxygen bottles received from the supplier that were not deploying properly, but it denied that any of them were actually fitted on aircraft. After retiring, he embarked on a long-running legal action against the company. He accused it of denigrating his character and hampering his career because of the issues he pointed out, charges rejected by Boeing. At the time of his death, Mr. Barnett had been in Charleston for legal interviews linked to the case. Oh, so he wasn't even at home. Wait, where was he found? They didn't even say where he was found. You mean to tell me this motherfucker left home and then was in an entirely different city for legal interviews linked to this case and then decided that was the time to hit the off switch? Last week, he gave formal depositions in which he was questioned by Boeing's lawyers before being cross-examined by his own counsel. He had been due to undergo further questioning on Saturday. When he did not appear, inquiries were made at his hotel. He was subsequently found dead in his truck in the hotel car park. So they think that this dude killed himself in his truck when he had a perfectly viable hotel room? Lawyers call his death tragic. In a statement, Boeing said, "We are saddened by Mr. Barnett's passing, and our thoughts are with his family and friends. His death comes at a time when production standards at both Boeing and its key supplier Spirit Aerosystems are under intense scrutiny." Lord Almighty. Yeah, that's why Epstein is trending. New 62-year-old Boeing whistleblower John Barnett found dead in his truck after he didn't show up for a legal interview linked to a case against Boeing. Barnett worked for Boeing for 32 years and retired in 2017. After retiring, Barnett spoke out about how Boeing was cutting corners on their planes. Just days before his death, Barnett gave evidence in a lawsuit against Boeing. Barnett accused Boeing of, quote, deliberately fitting substandard parts on the aircraft. He accused Boeing of having faulty oxygen systems, saying one in 4 breathing masks would not work in an emergency situation. Barnett said new plane builds were rushed. When he brought his concerns forward, they were allegedly ignored by the company. When he died, Barnett was in Charleston for interviews linked to the case against Boeing. He was supposed to come back for more questioning on Saturday, but did not show up. Inquiries were made at the hotel where Barnett was found dead in his car in the parking lot. Police are investigating Barnett's death, but said he died from a self-inflicted wound.
So those two, one, this is not a 737 problem. It's a Boeing problem. And I know the FAA's gone in and they've done due diligence and inspections to assure that the door plugs of the 737 are installed properly and the fasteners are torqued properly. But my concern is, what's the rest of the airplane? What's the rest of the condition of the airplane? And the reason my concern for that is back in 2012, Boeing started removing inspection operations off their jobs. So it left the mechanics to buy off their own work. So what we're seeing with the door plug blowout is what I've seen with the rest of the airplane, as far as jobs not being completed properly, inspection steps being removed, issues being ignored. My concerns are with the 737 and the 787, because those programs have really embraced the theory that quality is overhead and non-value added. So those two programs have really put a strong effort into removing
quality is overhead and non-value added. That explains a lot. That's actually a devious corporate way of putting it. That is corporate term. This guy has definitely talked to fucking executives about this, because only an executive would have the temerity to say quality is overhead and non-value added. As a quality assurance professional, that rankles some feathers.
Quality from the process. When I first started working at Charleston, I was in charge with pushing back defects to our suppliers. And what that meant was I'd take a group of inspectors and actually go to the supplier and inspect their product before they sent it in. Well, I'd taken a team of 4 inspectors to Spirit Aerosystems to inspect the 41 section before they sent it to Charleston. And we found 300 defects. Some of them were significant that needed engineering intervention. When I returned to Charleston, my senior manager told me that we had found too many defects and he was going to take the next trip. So the next trip he went on, he took 2 of my inspectors. And when they got back, they were given accolades for only finding 50 defects. So I pulled that inspector aside and I said, did Spirit really clean up their act that quick? That don't sound right. And she was mad. She said, no, said the 2 inspectors were given 2 hours to inspect the whole 41 section and they were kicked off the airplane.
Oh boy. And now this guy's dead. And now he's dead. So, holy shit. The saga of Boeing is unraveling at an insane pace at this point. I don't know where it's going to go from here. I mean, obviously, I don't have any sort of evidence or grounds to make declarative statements. I just, obviously, like everybody else who, is just becoming made aware of this, the vibes definitely feel like this was a hit. this is a hit job. I hope there is a real investigation. I hope they don't just rest on this self-inflicted, so it was a suicide and case closed. Yeah, this is fucking wild. I would have never imagined that we would start talking about whistleblowers dying as the saga of Boeing continues to spiral into one of a completely unmanageable paragon of late stage capitalist, corporate endeavors. For everyone that has ever fantasized about living in a dystopian cyberpunk future, the future is now. There is no need to envision some fantasy world. You already live in a dystopian cyberpunk future. And this is part and parcel of what that means on a corporate economical level. The economy of Boeing is far too important for any real consequence of nature with respects to how they handle both all of these defects, these life-threatening defects, these damaging defects, and how they handle people that whistleblow against these defects, leading up to and possibly even including murdering these motherfuckers. Allegedly, if that is what happened here, which I think is what happened, but I have no proof of that. Allegedly. Welcome to Night City. This city will eat you alive.